Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome to today's video. So today, we're going to be talking about the most commonly asked question in all of Raid Shadow Legends. Who should you 6-star next? And the answer is quite simple, actually. I'm not even going to bury the lead. We're going to get right into it. The answer is, it depends. So before we click off the video, obviously we're going to explain what that means. It's a multifaceted question with a multifaceted answer. And how I typically handle it when people have asked me in the past is I follow up their question with a question, that being, where do you need to progress? Are you working on your first Ultra Nightmare Demon Lord team? Are you stuck on Spider 13 and you feel like you're not getting enough accessories? Are you getting is your team wiping in stage 16 of Ice Golem? Are you trying to push from Fire Knight 20 to Fire Knight 24 because you want better gear? Are the Dark Fate copies just wrecking you when you try to kill them? Are you trying to push from hard to brutal on Hydra? Are you preparing for the new dungeon, the Sand Devil? Depending on where you are in the game, early game, mid game, late game, end game, you can fall into any one of these categories or more. But the point is that you're probably working towards something, or you should be working towards something. And that should help you dictate which champion you need to max next. Now for us as free-to-play players, it can be a little bit tougher since we have less access to epic and legendary tomes, which can make it more difficult to build our champions. So ideally, we're maxing champions that have a use in multiple areas, not just one. However, in the end game, you'll eventually reach the point where you will start maxing champions who have one specific job or one niche job, and that's because you just have nobody else left. It might take a while to get there, but you will eventually reach that point. So in order to expound upon the "it depends" answer, I'm putting up on the screen what I'm calling the helpful hierarchy. This will help you determine which areas of the game are more important than others in terms of your account progression, and help you decide where you need to progress, if any, fit. It's worth noting that this list is non-linear, meaning that you can do multiple at the same time depending on who you pull and when, and it does not have to be completed in this exact order. It really depends on the RNG of who you pull and who you get, and what gear you have available to build these champions. So starting from the top, we have Demon Lord Clan Boss. So ideally, you'd get your Ultra Nightmare team running up as soon as possible, getting the top chest, whether that be a 3-key, 4-key, 2-key, 1-key, etc. This is your best source of getting legendary and epic tomes, as well as sacred and void shards, so you want to get that going as quickly as possible. So any champion that can help you do that should be higher on your list. And this applies to making your first team, which could be a 3-key or a 4-key, or taking your team from a 3-key to a 2-key or a 3-key to a 1-key, etc. Those should be your highest priority champions because you'll be farming this daily and you want to get those resources regularly. After that, then you have dungeons. So the 4 main dungeons here where you get all your gear. This is the gear you're going to use to, build your clan boss team and also build your dungeon teams, etc. Typically, when you're starting off, your dungeon team is just organized off the first people you 6-star, and it should have some heavy overlap with your clan boss team. You will also need to be able to farm dungeons to complete fusions to get more legendary champions for free on your account that only cost energy and some shards. After that is where I would say you could start looking into Classic Arena and making sure you have a solid speed team for that, and maybe experimenting with Go Second teams. The early game has changed a lot since I started playing, so take that with a grain of salt. The main reason you want to develop that is for the Great Hall, so you can get a lot of gold medals and be working on your Great Hall stats. Typically nowadays, people focus on accuracy and resistance first because those are the most helpful long term, but eventually you can start working on the other areas as well, and this makes builds a lot easier. So if you have a rank 10, it's as good as a 5-star banner. So that takes a 5-star banner out of a lot of your builds, and it can really help you start to move up in content. Below that, we have Doom Tower and Faction Wars. So I have these listed as the same level because this is where you start to need specific types of champions to do certain things. So obviously for Faction Wars, they have to be in the right faction. Doesn't matter if it's a debuff or an Ogren tribes, you can't use them in Dark Elves, so you're going to need some form of the same job on your Dark Elf team. So you're going to need very specific champions. Doom Tower is similar in that regard, where the bosses, especially on hard, require certain types of champions who have the capabilities to do it. For Dark Fae, you typically want a lot of turn meter control. You might not have 2 Cold Hearts, you might not have an Allure, you might not have a Royal Guard, you might not have a Herndig, who's one of the best for killing your team and also keeping turn meter down, etc. For Bommel, one of the hardest bosses in the game, you might not have Vogoth or other people who can deal with the Dread Bombs. You might not have Rector, who has a really, really solid and strong passive to get more resistance for this fight. Depending on who you have, lucky or unlucky, you may or may not be able to do certain bosses, and so that's why this is lower, or these are lower on the hierarchy. For the earlier game, I would say focus more on faction wars because progression towards Lydia is more important, and you also get a decent amount of rewards from getting stars in faction wars. But Doom Tower on the side also gives you, Doom Tower Hard has Sacreds and Legendary Tomes at the top end, so it's more useful for resources, but you may or may not have the champions to build teams that might be able to beat that. And you might not have the gear yet because you're still working on farming dungeons. You can kind of see how this list starts to come together. After that is where I would say you start getting into the very, very niche of the end game. So we have Hydra Clan Boss and Tag Team Arena. So we'll start with Tag Team Arena because I will say it's worth throwing in just some random champions if you're chilling in Bronze 1. Just throw in your primary arena team from Classic Arena and some other champions that are just doing other jobs, and just try and farm the one-mans in the red if you can, or push into Bronze 2 where it's actually slightly easier than Bronze 1 because it's not as clumped or clustered. But when you're trying to get into Silver and beyond, into Gold, is where you're going to need very, very specific arena-focused champions with very specific arena builds in order to be able to contend with your opponents and beat them and be able to push up. In a similar vein, you have Hydra Clan Boss, which requires very, very, very specific champions who can do certain things like placing Veils or Provokes or enemy max HP, and if you do not have them, you basically can't do Hydra at the high levels. On normal, you can kind of just throw together a bunch of DPS and get the 6 million, and that'll be done. So you can kind of do that while you're working on your dungeon teams, your Doom Tower teams, Faction Wars teams, etc. But when you're ready to push to hard and to brutal and beyond is where you need very, very specific champions who can do very specific things in order to control the heads and have the fight go the way you need it to go. And beyond that is where I would place the new dungeon, which is not in the game yet, but the Sand Devil's Necropolis and the subsequent dungeon that's going to be used for artifact ascension. I think these are super endgame because these require you to have gear to ascend first of all, and typically you're going to want to ascend your good gear and see if it gets even better. You don't really need to do that in the early game because most of the content in the game that exists right now can be done with the gear as is, just farmed from the dungeons as well as farmed from Doom Tower. So I don't think you need to worry about gear ascension if you're in the earlier game, the mid game. I think it's mostly a late game dungeon. That's my opinion. So I would put that at the bottom of the list, or I did put that at the bottom of the list. So now that you have some guidelines to help you make the decision for yourself on who your next 6-star should be, I wanted to highlight myself in a case study to showcase some of my most recent 6-star selections and who my next 6 stars are going to be. I'll preface this section by saying that I am an endgame player, so my focus is a lot lower in the hierarchy. I'm mainly focused on Tag Team Arena because I'm trying to get and stay in gold so I can perform better in CVCs and I can get more points in Tag Team Arena tournaments. And I'm also working towards the Ramontu missions, which require me to complete Doom Tower Hard secret rooms. So those are my 2 main focuses. So starting things off, we're going to talk about Walking Tomb Drang, who I maxed recently. He's built in a speed and a resistance set. I maxed him out to enter into my Griffin team. So let me show that real quickly. But my Griffin team, I started to change it from more of a support-ish type composition to a more DPS focused composition here. So I took out the Reviver and they just try to power through with a lot of burn and a lot of damage and some ally attack as well. So his spot was previously Drexthar, and this highlights a point that's commonly referred to on Ash Raid Shadow Legends channel, but value over replacement. So Drang came in to replace Drexthar, who is another HP burner, but he does it via being attacked. And I run mine unbooked, and so the chance is relatively low at 55%. It's decent enough, but it's not as high as I'd like it to be. And so Drang allows me to take more control of it and actually place more HP burns for himself to activate and for Ninja to activate. And thus I'm more in control of the fight and I can add more burns to the mix and kill the boss faster, not waiting for him to hit my team. So he replaced Drexthar and he was more valuable in doing that role. But in addition to that, he also, since it cannot be resisted, he's also a decent candidate for my Frostbiter team. And so he might be able to do that. And I also use Drexthar on my Eternal Dragon team, so he might even take that spot there. The rotation ended before I maxed him out, so I haven't been able to test that. But he might take Drexthar's spot in 3 Doom Tower bosses. So that's huge. In addition to that, I also use Drang on my Hydra team, my Hard Hydra team. So he's doing dual purpose for multiple Doom Tower bosses as well as some of the mid-tier Hydra difficulties. The other case I wanted to look at is Skytouch Shaman, who I maxed out recently. I built her in immunity and speed, so she's fairly fast, decently resistant. And this is to highlight my arena focus. She's an immunity set so that she can cleanse and provide block debuffs for my team so I can better counter Torments and Hegemons for whenever they pop up in 3v3. And my last 6-star, which might surprise some of you, was actually Dagger. So in the Doom Tower, on this rotation, Secret Room 12 is actually 6-star Void attack champions. So if I filter by affinity here, I already have Genbo, I already have Skull Crown, and I have some Cold Hearts, but I didn't really have a debuffer, so they were struggling to do some damage last time I tried it. I already had Dagger at 5-star because she was my original Faction Wars Decreased Defense champion for Bannerlords before I pulled Stag Knight, so she was already at 50, and the Secret Room requires them to be rank 6. So I figured, why not? I'm at that point in the game where even though she's going to be used in one Secret Room only, it's still worth it to be able to beat the room because, again, I'm working on Ramontu, so I do need as many hard Secret Rooms completed as possible. So combining her with some other 6-star Void attack champions, I should be able to beat that room. So that was my most recent 6-star. The next case study I wanted to talk about was my next 6-star. Who am I choosing? And how did I make that decision? So typically the way I organize my account is people in the 6-star queue are outside of the vault and they will have gear on. So my 5 candidates are listed here. Not 6, because Lord Shazar is missing gear. He's not fully built yet, so he's not officially in the queue, but I was tinkering around with his build. So I have 5 candidates here. I have Haikatun, Madame Saris 2, Steel Skull, Yoshi, and Morrigan. So starting from the left, we have Madame Saris. She's going to be in immunity. My primary Madame Saris here is in full perception, so this is my auxiliary Sari, and it looks like she meets the criteria. She's fully built, she's got gear on, immunity set, perception set, ring, and everything. But there's one problem. And that problem is she doesn't have an accuracy banner available. My Dark Elves is a heavily filled faction, and I don't have currently a banner available for her. So effectively, she's not actually fully built. Because when I say fully built, to me, they're planned all the way to 6-star and they have a banner in waiting. So even though she's going to help me, similar to Skytouch Shaman, she's going to help me against some Torment teams and some Hegemon teams and still be able to retain my debuffing capability or buff stripping capability, she's not fully geared enough and thus she won't actually function. She would get the benefit of the base stats from being 6-star, but the other benefit of being 6-star is adding in a banner, which would be another 80 to 100 accuracy. And if I'm not getting that, she's not going to be as useful with just 300. And right next to her, we have Haikatun, similarly built in an immunity set, and her job is going to be to counter the nuking or CC Hegemons that are paired with a slower, tankier team. So she's going to be in immunity to resist, or not resist, to block those debuffs that he might place, and then be the speed booster who speeds up the rest of my champions so they can take their turns and do their job against the slow, tanky team. That's a very niche job, so that's one strike against her where that's not the majority of the cases that I go against in Arena. So she's a little bit lower down because of that. In addition, I do like the immunity pieces. They do have a lot of speed, but I don't like these gloves currently. They are crit damage, but they have speed on them, and that's why she has them. They're the only ones available. But I don't have a main stat. And again, I would like her to be able to take a hit from a nuking Hegemon who's paired with a tanky team. So if she's super squishy with just defense and no HP, she might not be able to do the job, even though I do have a banner ready for her as well. Even though it's not as important to have accuracy on her, again, it's more about the speed. But she could be ready, but I'm not fully satisfied with her gear, and so I would classify her as not fully built. Next to her, I have Steel Skull, who's in a Guardian set and built somewhat fast with some resistance. So Steel Skull is a great candidate. This is building him or maxing him out would be for Faction Wars efficiency. I've already beaten Faction Wars. I do have Lydia, but this team is not running as efficiently as it could, because if we look at his stats here, he's 5-star and he only has 248 resistance. That's not really enough on stage 21 or stage 20 to really resist the debuffs that the enemy waves might place or the enemy boss might place. So sometimes he does get feared, he gets provoked, he gets leeched, and he's not able to do his job, which is to tank, stay alive, and heal the rest of the team. So I do have a banner planned for him, a resist banner. If we look at that real quick, this one on the left with some speed and some defensive stats. So I do have a banner planned for him. He is fully built and he's ready to go. And he would, with the banner on, he'd be better capable of resisting debuffs placed by the enemy waves in Faction Wars, making it more efficient because he wouldn't be at risk of dying and he'd be able to do his job, which is to heal and protect. So next to Steel Skull is Yoshi the Drunkard, who's built in a triple speed set and with all speed subs. So he's meant to just go fast and power up my bombers with increased attack and increased accuracy. So he's going to be around 300 something speed by the end of it, and come in on the mid-tier speed team, followed up by Morrigan, then followed up by Rianne, and followed up by my Gaius, or eventually Lord Chazar. So a high accuracy, mid-speed bomb team. Now he has a similar problem with High Katoon, where the gear is optimized for speed, but not really for survivability. So if he takes a hit, he's going to fall over. He's a support, but this is an attack chest, and this is flat defense. Again, the speed subs are very good, and that's why they're on him in the speed set. But he's not going to survive, so that's a bit suboptimal. And another reason is his increased accuracy job is already kind of dealt with by Lady Kimmy, who's built a little bit faster than him, and with accuracy as well. So for now, I do have an increased accuracy and an increased speed. So essentially Morrigan and Yoshi combined. I already have an increased accuracy champion. And so he's not coming in to replace her. He would be alongside her. And with a combination of Arbiter and Lady Kimmy, I kind of get Yoshi's kit already. So he's not immediately needed, but he will be necessary down the line if I want to run 2 bomb teams once Lord Chazar is ready to go as well. And lastly, we have Morrigan, one of our recent fusions built in a speed perception set. So she's going to be relatively fast, around like 280-ish speed when I'm done, and probably 450-ish accuracy when she's maxed out. So she is a great candidate as well, fully built. I do have a banner planned for her as well. This accuracy one here with 16 speed, so that's exactly what she needs, more speed and more accuracy. Her job, as I kind of hinted at earlier, is kind of be that mid-tier second level speed booster, kind of like a Deacon, where she could pair with an Arbiter for a double speed boost if I need it, or she can kind of run against a slower, tankier team with Yoshi, and I can buff strip and then bomb. So that type of team is where she'd be useful for me. So if you've been following along, you can kind of see that there's really only 2 options here out of the 5, and that would be Morrigan and Steel Skull. Both of them are fully built, both of them have a banner ready to go for when they're 6-star. But there's one more difference between them. Steel Skull is an epic, and Morrigan is a legendary. He has his skills booked enough. I didn't need the extra 2 books on the A1, he's not built with accuracy, so the poisons are not really that important. But Morrigan is currently unbooked, which means that she won't really be able to decrease turn meter, she won't 100% of the time. She won't be able to steal buffs, place the True Fear 100% of the time, and she won't place decreased speed at a higher clip. Now, she's second on my list of legendaries to book, so she will be booked soon, but she's actually not ready to go. She's geared, but she's not booked. Therefore, she won't be able to effectively do her job in Arena where I need it, Or in Faction Wars, where I'm also planning to use her, she won't be able to steal Valkyrie's shield all the time. She won't be able to place True Fears all the time. So she's not really going to function. She'll be built, but she won't function. And with that in mind, that leaves us with Steel Skull, who will be my next 6-star champion. Alright, so that's going to do it for today's video. I've put the hierarchy back up on the screen so you can review it at your leisure. Hopefully this video has been useful to you guys so you can decide for yourself who your next 6-star is going to be. I also did try to highlight who were my most recent 6-stars, why I chose them, as well as my upcoming 6-star here, Steel Skull. So if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like it, drop a like and subscribe to the channel for more. If you wanted to rearrange the hierarchy, leave your version in the comment section down below. What would you do? And how would you prioritize the different areas of the game? Thanks for watching, and have a good one.